Hello and welcome to video lesson 1 about chapter 11. The title of chapter 11 is Conquests Change Society. We are going to talk about how the Roman conquests change the Roman society. Dus de veroveringen die een invloed hebben op de Romeinse maatschappij. We gaan onderzoeken in hoeverre die veroveringen een invloed hebben op die Romeinse maatschappij. We situate ourselves in time first. We are going to talk about the situation during the 2nd century BC specifically. Of course, before we talk about the 2nd century BC, which takes place during the Roman Republic, we need to know what happened before, because a situation is always the effect of a certain cause. Het is altijd een effect, een gevolg van een zekere gebeurtenis die er voorkwam. So we are going to focus on that 3rd century BC and what happened then, what conquests the Romans did during that What happened during that 3rd century BC? Let's have a look at the stages of the Roman conquests. This is something that you have already seen in a previous video. So these maps might look familiar. You know that Rome started off as a city-state, which you can see in the first map, just the city of Rome itself. Then it expanded. It gained control over the entire Italian peninsula, which we call stage 1. Then it expanded even further. They were very ambitious and they wanted to take over the economy of the Carthaginians. You might remember that from the previous video as well. I'm going to talk about that in a few minutes' time. So they succeed in expanding their territory, the territory of the Carthaginians, and eventually even more. And as you can see in stage 2, they succeed in taking over the power in the Mediterranean world and even more than that. In the last stage, stage 3, you see that they gain control over a vast empire. So the biggest size of the Roman Empire. If we put that together with our timeline, then you can see how Rome evolved, how it expanded over time. So we were talking about the 3rd century BC. We wanted to focus on that 3rd century BC. Well, then we are in stage 2. So stage 2, where the Romans take over the economic power of the Carthaginians. Taking over the economic power of the Carthaginians, we call those wars, that conflict, the Punic Wars. You might remember this, the map that you see here from a previous video. Mr. Kleis told you about the fact that the periphery of Rome and the periphery of Carthage overlap. So where you see the exclamation mark, that's where their peripheries overlap. So they are both quite ambitious and they want to take over especially the Isle of Sicily. Sicily was very important because it was very fertile. The Romans were quite successful. There were a lot of people living in Rome at that time, and all those people needed to be fed. So that is why they need a lot of grain. And they wanted to take over the Isle of Sicily, now in the hands of Carthage, because they wanted all that grain for their people. They needed more food. And besides from Sicily, it was, economically speaking, very interesting to take over the Carthaginian territory because they had a lot of profitable harbors and amounts of land as well. So, conflict between Rome and Carthage. Let's have a look at this map. In purple, you see the Carthaginian area. the beginning of the Punic Wars. And of course, in red, you see the Roman area. At that time, just the Italian peninsula. But the Romans were quite interested in taking over the purple territory, the Carthaginian territory as well. As you can see, a lot of territory of the Carthaginians is situated around the coasts. So if you want to install harbors, if you want to trade, it is very profitable to get your hands on these harbors of the Carthaginians. Here you see a map of the Punic Wars. We're not going to look at the details of that map, but it gives you an idea of those Punic Wars. They didn't last for a few days, and they were spread over a few years, so it wasn't very easy for the Romans to take over the Carthaginian territory. One story of these Punic Wars is a story that is often told when we're talking about the Punic Wars. It's what you can see in the picture, the reconstruction picture. It's a reconstruction picture of Hannibal, which is an army leader, a Carthaginian army leader, and he used elephants. So he had war elephants, and he crossed the Alps to get to Italy using those war elephants. And that is one of the important, or the stories that are quite interesting if we look at the Punic Wars. Eventually, as you can see on this map, in orange the Carthaginian areas, in green the Roman areas, the Romans succeed over time during the First, the Second, and the Third Punic War to take over the Carthaginian territory. And here you see Third Punic War at the end, all is green, and it belongs to Rome then. It's an important victory. Of course, for the economy of Rome. Rome is now able to feed its people, and even more than that. So for their economy, it is really a boost. And they also are in a winning mood now. So it was a difficult victory, but once they are victorious, they become even more ambitious, and they want to take over even more territory. But does more land, more territory bring more wealth to the Roman people? That is the question we ask ourselves during this chapter. Here you see two important groups in Rome at that time, and we are going to study the effect of the conquests on these two groups of people. You have the Roman farmer one side and the large Roman landowner on the other side. For this part, you'll need your course book, page 153, which you will find on Smart School. So in a few minutes time, when this video is over, you'll have to look at that page. But before the video is over, I'll explain to you how we will look at the effect of the conquests on these two groups of people. On page 153, you will find a few sources. And these sources talk about the situation for the small farmers, and the sources also mention the situation or the features of the large landowners. Dus de kleine boeren, de grootgrondbezitters. So you get an idea of their situation. I want you to use two colors while reading those sources. You use a color to indicate all the things that tell you more about the small farmers, and you use another color to indicate all the information that you get about the situation of the large landowners. When you did that, then you have a look at the grid. So one side, small farmers, you have to indicate whether the small farmers became more rich or more poor. Werden ze rijker of werden ze armer? Because, and then you can use the information from your sources to give reasons why they become more rich or more poor according to those sources. You do the same thing for the landowners, so check out your other color, check out the other things that you highlighted. Do those landowners become even more rich, or do they become more poor? And what are the reasons that you indicated rich or that you indicated poor? So this video is over. Prepare page 153 first before you continue.